The gunshot that killed Samuel Crawford's wife still echoed in his nightmares. Though 3 years had passed since that autumn evening when outlaws rode through their ranch looking for horses and left behind only devastation. He stood at the edge of his property outside Circleville, Utah, watching the sun climb over the red rock formations that ringed the valley, his calloused hands gripping the fence post hard enough to make his knuckles white. The ranch ran itself mostly through hired hands now, because Samuel had learned that keeping busy only worked during daylight hours. And even then, the memories found ways to slip through his defenses like water through cupped fingers. It was 1878, and the territory was still wild enough that justice moved slowly when it moved at all. The men who murdered Caroline had vanished into the wilderness, and Samuel had spent the better part of a year tracking them before realizing that revenge would not fill the hollow space inside his chest. He returned to find his ranch in disrepair, his reputation as one of the finest horse breeders in southern Utah nearly forgotten, and his heart so thoroughly walled off that the neighboring families had stopped extending dinner invitations. At 32 years old, Samuel looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened from squinting at horizons and searching for threats that might never come. His dark hair had started showing silver at the temples, and his jaw carried the permanent tension of someone who had forgotten how to truly relax. He was tall and broad-shouldered, built for the hard work of ranch life, but there was a heaviness to the way he moved now, as though he carried invisible weight on his back. The sound of hoofbeats made him turn, hand instinctively moving toward the revolver at his hip before he recognized his foreman, Jack Morrison, riding up the dusty path. "Got a situation in town," Jack called out, reining in his horse. "Thought you should know about it." Samuel raised an eyebrow. He avoided Circleville's Main Street whenever possible, conducting his business through Jack or making quick trips to the general store before dawn when the streets were empty. "There is a woman at the hotel," Jack continued, dismounting. "Showed up yesterday on the stage from Salt Lake City. She is asking around about ranch work, but nobody will hire her. The hotel keeper is getting nervous about her bill." "Plenty of ranches need help," Samuel said, turning back to examine the fence line. "Not my concern. She is asking specifically about horse ranches. Says she has experience with training." Jack paused, choosing his words carefully. "Word is she ran away from somewhere, maybe a husband. She looks like she has been through something rough." Samuel felt the familiar tightness in his chest. He did not want to care about some stranger's troubles. Caring led to attachment, and attachment led to loss. He had learned that lesson thoroughly enough. "Still not my concern," he repeated, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Jack was quiet for a moment, studying his boss with the frankness that came from 10 years of working together. "You know, Sam, Caroline would not have wanted you to live like this, shut off from everything." The use of his late wife's name made Samuel's jaw clench. "Do not. I am just saying what everybody knows but will not tell you to your face. You are barely alive anymore. You go through the motions, but there is nothing behind it." Jack held up his hands before Samuel could respond. "I will drop it, but that woman at the hotel is going to end up in a bad situation if somebody does not help her. That is all I came to say." After Jack rode off to check on the northern pastures, Samuel tried to focus on his work. He spent an hour repairing fence posts, then moved to the barn to check on a mare that was due to foal within the week. But his mind kept drifting back to Jack's words. A woman alone in Circleville, running from something, with nowhere to go. The town was not unkind, but it was practical. A woman without means or protection would quickly find herself with limited and unpleasant options. It was none of his business. He had enough ghosts without collecting new ones. By mid-afternoon, Samuel found himself saddling his horse and riding toward town, telling himself he was just going to check on a supply order at the general store. The lie did not even convince him, but he climbed into the saddle anyway. Circleville stretched along a single main street, with buildings constructed from the same red rock that formed the surrounding cliffs. The town had grown in recent years as more settlers arrived, drawn by the promise of good grazing land and the protection offered by the nearby fort. Samuel nodded to a few people as he rode past, but did not stop to talk. He tied his horse outside the hotel, a two-story structure that served as the social hub for travelers passing through on their way to other destinations. The lobby was empty except for Harold Bennett, the hotel keeper, who looked up from his ledger with evident relief when Samuel walked in. "Samuel Crawford," Harold said, standing quickly. "Thank goodness. I was hoping someone would come. Jack mentioned you have a guest looking for ranch work." "That is putting it mildly. She has been here 2 days and cannot pay past tonight. I have tried to be Christian about it, but I run a business, not a charity." Harold lowered his voice. "She seems decent enough, but you know how it is. A woman alone, no references, no family. People are talking." Samuel felt a flicker of anger at the implication. "Where is she?" "Room 7, upstairs. I can fetch her if you want to wait here." "I will go up." Harold looked uncertain about the propriety of that, but Samuel was already climbing the narrow staircase. He found room 7 at the end of the hall and knocked firmly on the door. "Mr. Bennett, I told you I would have the money soon," a woman's voice called from inside. There was a tremor in it, fear barely held in check. "It is not Bennett," Samuel said. "My name is Samuel Crawford. I own a horse ranch outside town. I heard you are looking for work." A long pause followed. Then the door opened a crack, revealing a sliver of a face. Even in that limited view, Samuel could see the bruise along her cheekbone, faded to yellow and green but still visible. The eye that peered at him was a striking blue-green, like shallow water over sand, and filled with wariness. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "I appreciate you coming, but I should tell you right away that I cannot cook very well and I do not do laundry. I work with horses. If that is not what you need, then I am wasting your time." The directness surprised him. "Can you open the door so we can talk properly?" Another pause, then the door swung wider. The woman who stood before him was perhaps 25 or 26, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical braid that could not quite contain all the curls. She was slender in a way that suggested missed meals rather than natural build, and she held herself with a strange combination of defiance and exhaustion. She wore a simple brown dress that had seen better days, and her hands bore the calluses and small scars of someone who worked with animals. "My name is Vivian Carter," she said, meeting his gaze directly despite the flush of embarrassment on her face. "I trained horses for my father's ranch in Colorado until he sold the property last year. I have been working odd jobs since then, but I want to get back to training. I am good at it." "Better than good. I can gentle the wildest horse you have without breaking its spirit, and I can train them for riding, driving, or ranch work. I do not need much in wages if you can provide room and board." Samuel studied her for a moment. There was a story behind those bruises and the desperate edge to her voice, but he had learned not to pry into painful pasts. "Why Circleville?" "Because it is far enough from Colorado," she said simply. "And because I heard Utah ranchers breed good horses, I figured someone might need help." "You figured wrong, apparently." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Men do not like hiring women for real work. They think we are too delicate or too difficult. I have heard every excuse. Or they are worried about what happens when a woman is alone on a ranch with hired men," Samuel said bluntly. "It is not always about your capability," She lifted her chin. "I can handle myself. That bruise on your face says otherwise." Her hand instinctively moved to her cheek, then dropped. "That is from before. It will not happen again." Samuel should have walked away then. He should have given her a few dollars for a stage ticket and wished her luck elsewhere. Instead, he heard himself saying, "I have a mare who needs gentling. She is 3 years old, good bloodlines, but she is terrified of saddles. I have been too busy to work with her properly. If you can get her ready to ride in 2 weeks, I will consider hiring you on permanently." Hope flashed across Vivian's face, so bright and sudden that it made something twist in Samuel's chest. "I can do that. I promise you I can do that. The ranch is 4 miles outside town. You would stay in the small cabin near the barn. It needs cleaning, but it is sturdy. Meals with the hired hands, $1 a day during the trial period." He paused. "And for what it is worth, my men know better than to cause trouble. But if you are running from something, you should know that Circleville is a small town. People talk." "I am not running from the law," Vivian said quickly. "Just from a mistake I do not intend to repeat." Samuel nodded slowly. He understood that sentiment better than she knew. "Be ready in an hour. I will settle your bill here and bring you out to the ranch, Mr. Crawford." Her voice stopped him as he turned to leave. "Why are you helping me?" He looked back at her, this strange woman with her bruised face and desperate courage, and could not quite explain the impulse that had driven him here. "Everybody needs a chance to start over," he said finally. "Seems like you need one more than most." The ride out to the ranch was quiet. Vivian sat behind him on his horse, her small traveling bag clutched against her chest, and did not attempt conversation. Samuel was grateful for that. He was already questioning his decision, wondering what had possessed him to bring a stranger into his carefully maintained isolation. By the time they reached the property, his mood had soured enough that his instructions were terse. "That is the main house," he said, pointing to the 2-story structure built from local timber and stone. "You do not go in there. The cabin is over there past the barn. Outhouse is behind it. Well water is safe to drink. Meals are at sunrise, noon, and sunset in the bunkhouse. You will meet the men tonight at supper." Vivian slid down from the horse, stumbling slightly as she found her footing. "When do I start with the mare?" "Tomorrow morning. I will show you which one." He hesitated, then added in a slightly gentler tone, "The cabin should have basic supplies. If you need anything else, let Jack know. He is the foreman." "Thank you," Vivian said softly. "I know you did not have to do this." Samuel did not respond, just rode toward the barn to unsaddle his horse. He could feel her watching him, but he did not look back. This was just a business arrangement, he told himself. She would train the mare, he would pay her, and that would be the end of it. No need for it to be more complicated than that. But that night, lying in his bed in the too large house that still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets Caroline used to make, Samuel found himself thinking about the hope that had lit up Vivian's face when he offered her the job. It had been a long time since he had made anyone look that happy. The realization troubled him enough that sleep was a long time coming. Vivian woke before dawn in the small cabin, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The room was sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a small stove for heat. She had scrubbed it thoroughly the evening before, needing the familiar rhythm of work to settle her nerves. Now, in the gray pre-dawn light, she could see the ranch beginning to stir through the cabin's single window. She dressed quickly in the split riding skirt and heavy shirt she had bought with the last of her savings in Salt Lake City, then tied her hair back securely. Her reflection in the small mirror showed the bruise on her face had faded further, but the memory of how she got it was still sharp. Thomas had seemed kind at first, offering her work at his stable in Denver after her father died and the ranch was sold to pay debts. But kindness had turned to possession, and possession to violence when she tried to leave. She had finally run one night when he was drunk, taking only what she could carry and using every cent she had to get as far away as possible. She would not think about Thomas anymore. That part of her life was over. The barn was already lit when she approached, and she could hear the sound of horses moving in their stalls and men talking in low voices. She paused at the entrance, suddenly nervous. In her experience, ranch hands fell into two categories: those who resented a woman's presence and those who saw it as an invitation. She could handle both, but she was tired of having to. "You must be the new trainer," a voice said, and she turned to see a middle-aged man with a weathered face approaching. "I am Jack Morrison, foreman. Sam said you would be starting today." "Vivian Carter," she said, shaking his offered hand firmly. "Which horse am I working with?" Jack led her down the row of stalls, pointing out the ranch's layout as they walked. The operation was impressive, with at least 20 horses that she could see and facilities that spoke of serious breeding programs. They stopped at a stall near the end where a beautiful bay mare with white stockings paced nervously. "This is Dancer," Jack said. "Sam bought her as a yearling from a ranch in Nevada. Best bloodlines you will find in the territory, but something spooked her bad when we tried to break her last year. Now she will not let anyone near her with tack." Vivian studied the mare, noting the intelligence in her eyes and the way she watched them with alert wariness. What happened when she was spooked? One of the men tried to force a saddle on her before she was ready. She reared up, caught her leg in the ropes and panicked. Took 3 men to calm her down, and she has been scared of everything since. Anger flashed through Vivian. Rough handling ruined more horses than any other cause, and it was almost always because someone was impatient or ignorant. "I will need time alone with her. No one else in the barn when I am working." Jack nodded. "Sam said you call the shots with the training. Just let us know what you need." "I need patience and quiet," Vivian said. "The rest she will tell me herself." She spent that first morning just sitting outside Dancer's stall, not attempting to touch the mare or even approach her. She simply sat on a bale of hay and waited, occasionally talking in a low, soothing voice about nothing in particular. The mare watched her with suspicion at first, then gradually seemed to relax, going back to eating hay while keeping one eye on the strange woman. Samuel appeared around mid-morning, leaning against the barn entrance to observe. Vivian was aware of his presence but did not acknowledge it, keeping her focus on the horse. After several minutes, he spoke. "You are not doing anything." "I am doing everything," Vivian replied calmly. "She needs to learn that I am not a threat, that I will not force her or hurt her. Once she believes that, the rest will follow. I gave you 2 weeks, and I will have her ready in that time, but not if you rush me." She finally looked at him, meeting his dark eyes steadily. "Trust the process, Mr. Crawford." Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly for her to identify. "It is Samuel," he said. "No one here uses titles. Then call me Vivian." He nodded and walked away, but she noticed he came back several times throughout the day, always watching from a distance. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Probably just another person who would eventually leave or disappoint him. There was a loneliness in him that she recognized because she carried the same weight herself. By the end of the first week, Dancer was eating from Vivian's hand and allowing her to approach freely. By the end of the second week, the mare wore a saddle without panic and responded to basic commands. Vivian spent hours each day in the corral with her, moving slowly and patiently, rewarding every small success with gentle words and treats. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying in a way nothing else had been since her father died. The other ranch hands had accepted her presence with varying degrees of grace. Most ignored her, which suited Vivian fine. A few were openly skeptical until they saw her work. Jack became an ally, appreciating her skill and defending her to the others when needed. And Samuel remained a distant, enigmatic presence, appearing at odd times to watch her train but rarely speaking beyond basic instructions or questions about the horse. She found herself watching him in return when she thought he would not notice. There was something compelling about the contrast between his careful control and the pain that showed through in unguarded moments. She had seen him one evening standing alone by the fence, staring at nothing, his whole posture radiating grief. It had made her chest ache with sympathetic sorrow. On the 14th day, Vivian saddled Dancer and led her around the corral, then mounted her carefully. The mare tensed but did not panic, responding to the gentle pressure of Vivian's legs and the soft commands she murmured. They walked around the corral in slow circles, then progressed to an easy trot. By the time Vivian dismounted, she was grinning despite herself. Samuel had been watching from the fence, and when she led Dancer over to where he stood, he actually smiled. It transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "That was impressive," he said, reaching out to stroke the mare's neck. "I did not think it was possible." "She just needed someone to listen to what she was afraid of," Vivian said, running her hand along Dancer's shoulder. "And to show her that trusting people again would not get her hurt." Samuel's eyes met hers, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding that had nothing to do with horses. Then he stepped back, the walls coming up again. "You have earned your permanent position," he said. "Jack will work out the details with you about which horses need training next. Your wage goes up to $1.50 a day, and you can stay in the cabin as long as you are working here." "Thank you," Vivian said, meaning it more than he probably realized. This job was not just income. It was proof that she could rebuild her life, that she was more than the scared woman who had run from Denver with bruises on her face and terror in her heart. As summer deepened into the hottest part of the year, Vivian settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She worked with 3 more horses after Dancer, each with its own challenges and personality. Word began to spread in the area about the woman trainer at the Crawford ranch, who could gentle the most difficult horses, and Samuel started getting inquiries from other ranchers about buying his horses or hiring her services. The relationship between Vivian and Samuel remained cordial but distant. They spoke about horses and ranch business, but never about anything personal. Vivian told herself that was preferable. She had not come here looking for connection, just for work and safety. But she found herself noticing small things about him. The way he was unfailingly fair with his workers, how he often went without to make sure everyone else had enough, the gentleness in his hands when he handled the horses despite his gruff demeanor. One evening in late July, a severe thunderstorm rolled across the valley. Vivian had just finished evening chores when the rain started, heavy drops that quickly turned into a downpour. She ran for the cabin, but by the time she reached it, she was soaked through. She was changing into dry clothes when she heard a crash from outside, followed by the terrified screaming of a horse. She did not hesitate, just threw her coat back on and ran toward the sound. In the barn, she found chaos. The storm had torn part of the roof loose, and debris had fallen into one of the stalls. The horse inside, a young gelding named Storm, was panicking, throwing himself against the walls hard enough to injure himself. "Easy, easy," Vivian called out, but she could not get close enough to calm him without risking being trampled. She could see blood on his shoulder where he had scraped against a protruding nail. Then Samuel was there, appearing out of the rain like a ghost. "What happened?" "Roof came down." He is going to hurt himself worse if we cannot calm him." Samuel assessed the situation quickly. "We need to get him out of the stall, but not while he is like this. Can you get on the other side and try to calm him while I move the debris?" They worked together in tense synchronization, Vivian talking steadily to the panicked horse, while Samuel carefully removed the fallen boards from the stall entrance. When the path was clear, Vivian managed to slip a lead rope around Storm's neck and guide him out into the barn aisle, away from the thing that had terrified him. The gelding was trembling all over, whites showing around his eyes, but he responded to Vivian's voice and touch, gradually relaxing. Samuel appeared with a medical kit and began examining the injury on the horse's shoulder. "It is not deep," he said, cleaning the wound carefully. "He will be fine once he settles down." Vivian kept stroking Storm's neck, murmuring reassurances. "You are all right now. Nothing is going to hurt you. You are safe." When Samuel finished bandaging the wound, he stood back and looked at Vivian. She was soaked again from running out in the rain, her hair plastered to her face, her hands gentle on the horse. Something in his expression made her breath catch. "You are good at this," he said quietly. "Not just the training, the caring." "They deserve to be cared for," Vivian replied. "They give us everything. The least we can do is treat them with kindness." "I meant what I said before, about everybody needing a chance to start over." Samuel hesitated, then continued in a voice so low she had to strain to hear it over the rain. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Outlaws came looking for horses, and she was in the wrong place. I spent a year trying to find them and nearly lost myself in the process. When I came back, I thought the best thing I could do was just shut everything out, stop caring about anything except the ranch." Vivian's heart clenched at the pain in his voice. "I am so sorry. Jack told me I was barely alive anymore. He was right." Samuel met her eyes. "But watching you these past weeks, the way you bring those horses back from fear and teach them to trust again, it made me think maybe it is possible. Not just for them, for people too." The vulnerability in his admission made Vivian want to reach out to offer comfort, but she was not sure how it would be received. "I think we are all just trying to heal from something," she said softly. "Some wounds are just deeper than others. What are you healing from?" The question was gentle, not prying, giving her permission to share or not. She took a breath. "I ran from a man in Denver who thought he owned me, who hit me when I tried to leave. I was supposed to marry him because I had nowhere else to go after my father died, but I could not do it. I knew if I stayed, I would lose myself completely." Samuel's jaw tightened. "He is the one who gave you those bruises." "Yes, but I got away, and I am not going back." She said it fiercely, needing him to understand that she was not a victim anymore, just someone rebuilding. "I would not let him take you even if he found you here," Samuel said, and the protective edge in his voice sent warmth through her chest. "You are under my protection as long as you work for me. Nobody touches you without answering to me." It was not a romantic declaration, just a statement of fact. But Vivian felt tears prick her eyes anyway, because it had been so long since anyone had offered to stand between her and harm. "Thank you," she managed. They stood there in the barn with the rain drumming on what was left of the roof and Storm finally calm between them, and something shifted. The walls they had both carefully maintained began to develop cracks, letting light through. After that night, things changed between them in small ways. Samuel started joining Vivian in the barn in the evenings after supper, ostensibly to check on the horses, but really just to talk. She learned about his childhood on a ranch in Wyoming, about how he had come to Utah to make his own way, about Caroline and the happiness they had shared before it was torn away. She told him about growing up with horses, about her father's patient teaching, about the loneliness of the past year and her determination to never depend on anyone again. "That is a hard way to live," Samuel observed one evening as they sat outside the barn watching the sunset paint the red rocks gold and crimson, never letting anyone in. "It is safer," Vivian said. "When you do not care, you cannot be hurt, but you care about the horses." She smiled slightly. "Horses are different. They do not lie or manipulate, they just are what they are. People can be that way too if you find the right ones." He paused. "I think you are one of those people, Vivian. You do not hide what you are or pretend to be something else. It is refreshing." She looked at him, at the way the fading light caught in his dark hair and softened the hard lines of his face. "I think you are too, Samuel, under all those walls you built." His eyes met hers, and the moment stretched between them, filled with possibility and fear in equal measure. Then he stood abruptly. "I should check on the north fence before dark." Vivian watched him walk away and tried to ignore the disappointment that settled in her stomach. She understood his retreat. Getting close to someone again was terrifying when you had already lost so much. But part of her wished he had stayed, that he had been brave enough to let whatever was growing between them continue to develop. August brought scorching heat that baked the valley and made the red rocks shimmer in the distance. Work became a test of endurance, done in the early morning and late evening to avoid the worst of the day's heat. Vivian found herself spending more time in the creek that ran through the property, cooling off in the shade of the cottonwood trees that grew along its banks. She was there one afternoon, sitting with her feet in the water and her hair down for once, when Samuel appeared on the path. He stopped when he saw her, clearly not expecting to find anyone there. "I am sorry," he said. "I did not mean to intrude." "It is your creek," Vivian pointed out. "You have every right to be here." He hesitated, then came closer, sitting on a boulder a respectful distance away. "Jack says you have been doing excellent work with the new horses. We have had 3 offers to buy them already. They are good horses. They deserve good homes." She glanced at him. "You could come down here sometimes when it is hot. The water is wonderful." "I used to," Samuel admitted. "Caroline and I would come here in the evening sometimes. After she died, I could not stand it. Too many memories." Vivian understood that completely. There were places in Colorado she knew she could never return to, places that would always be tainted by association. "Maybe it is time to make new memories here," she suggested gently, "so the old ones do not have all the power." Samuel considered that, staring at the water flowing over smooth stones. "You are wise for someone so young. I am 26, not a child, and I learned wisdom the hard way." She pulled her feet from the water and turned to face him fully. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you punish yourself? You did not kill those men who hurt your wife. You did not cause what happened, but you live like you are serving a sentence." The bluntness of the question made him flinch, but he did not look away. "Because I should have protected her. I should have been there." "You cannot be everywhere at once. You cannot prevent every bad thing from happening." Vivian's voice was firm but kind. "I know you loved her. I know you miss her, but she would not want you to stop living just because she did." "How do you know what she would want?" "Because if you loved someone and died, would you want them to be miserable forever? Or would you want them to find happiness again, to honor your memory by living fully?" Samuel was quiet for a long time, the only sound the gurgle of the creek and the distant call of a hawk. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of caring about someone again and losing them. I do not think I could survive that twice." Vivian's heart ached for him, for the fear that was so similar to her own. "I understand that. I am afraid too. Afraid of trusting someone and having them hurt me. Afraid of needing someone and having them control me." She took a breath. "But we cannot let fear win, Samuel. If we do, we are not really alive anyway." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the moment when something in him broke open. "You are braver than you know," he said softly. "I am not brave at all. I am terrified every single day, but I get up and keep going anyway because what else is there?" She smiled slightly. "Maybe that is what bravery is. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let it stop you." Samuel stood and moved closer, coming to sit beside her on the bank. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the faint scar on his chin, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted. "How to let someone in again." "Neither do I," Vivian said honestly, "but maybe we could figure it out together. No expectations, no promises we are not ready to make, just two people who are tired of being alone. I would like that." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm against hers, and the simple contact sent a shiver through her despite the heat. "Can I court you properly? Take you to dinner in town, maybe to the dance they have every month?" Vivian felt warmth bloom in her chest. He was not rushing, not assuming, just asking permission to try. "Yes," she said. "I would like that very much." They sat by the creek until the sun began to set, talking about everything and nothing, their hands linked between them like a bridge spanning the distance they had both maintained. It was not a grand romantic gesture, just two wounded people choosing to trust each other with small pieces of themselves. But it felt significant in a way that made Vivian's breath catch. The courtship unfolded slowly through the late summer and into autumn, as careful and deliberate as gentling a nervous horse. Samuel took Vivian to dinner at the hotel in Circleville, where they endured the curious stares of neighbors and made polite conversation about the weather and the ranch. He took her to the monthly dance, and though they were both rusty and self-conscious at first, by the end of the evening they were laughing as they stumbled through the steps. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows, not arranged in a fancy bouquet but still clutched in their roots, so she could plant them near her cabin. She made him a new set of reins for his favorite horse, tooling patterns into the leather during the long evening hours. They rode out together to check on distant parts of the ranch, racing each other across open ground, and then walking the horses side by side while they talked about dreams and fears, and all the small details that make up a life. The physical affection between them developed with the same gradual care. A touch on the arm became holding hands. Holding hands became his arm around her waist as they walked. A kiss on the cheek became a real kiss, tentative and sweet, one evening under the stars. Each step forward was negotiated silently, both of them paying attention to the other's comfort, making sure neither felt rushed or pressured. Vivian had not expected to fall in love. She had thought herself too damaged, too wary. But Samuel's patience and his own wounded history made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before. He never tried to control her or limit her. He celebrated her successes with the horses and listened when she talked about her dreams of maybe having her own training operation someday. He made her laugh with dry observations about ranch life and held her when she had nightmares about Thomas finding her. Samuel had not expected to feel this way again. He had been certain that part of his heart had died with Caroline. But Vivian's courage and her refusal to give up on life, despite everything she had endured, made him want to be brave too. She challenged him when he retreated into old grief, but never pushed too hard. She understood that healing was not linear, that some days were harder than others. She made him remember what it was like to look forward to tomorrow instead of just enduring it. By October, when the cottonwoods turned gold and the air held the first hint of winter cold, they were deeply in love. It showed in the way Samuel's face softened when Vivian entered a room, in the way she unconsciously leaned toward him when they stood together, in the easy companionship that had developed between them. One evening, after a particularly successful day of training a difficult stallion, Vivian joined Samuel on the porch of the main house. He had started inviting her there in the evenings, breaking his own rule about her not entering his space. They sat in the rocking chairs Caroline had chosen years ago, watching the sun set behind the red rock formations. "I received a letter today," Samuel said, his voice careful. "From the territorial marshal. They caught the men who killed Caroline. They are going to hang next month." Vivian reached over and took his hand. "How do you feel about that?" "I thought I would feel satisfied, vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired." He turned to look at her. "It does not change anything knowing they will pay for what they did. She is still gone. But maybe now I can stop carrying it around like a weight. Maybe now you can forgive yourself for not being able to save her." Samuel brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You have helped me more than you know. Not just with moving past Caroline's death, but with remembering how to live. I was so closed off before you came. I had forgotten what it felt like to care about someone, to look forward to seeing them every day." "I felt the same way," Vivian admitted. "I thought if I could just survive on my own, never need anyone, I would be safe. But that is not really living. It is just existing." She smiled at him. "You taught me that it is possible to trust someone without losing yourself, that being loved does not mean being owned." "Vivian Carter, I am absolutely in love with you," Samuel said, the words coming out in a rush as though he had been holding them back too long. "I know it has only been a few months. I know we both came into this broken, but you make me want to believe in the future again. You make me happy." Tears pricked Vivian's eyes. "I love you too, Samuel Crawford. I did not think I could feel this way about anyone. I was so afraid of ending up trapped again, but you never make me feel trapped. You make me feel free." He pulled her up from her chair and into his arms, holding her close while the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. "I do not have a ring yet," he murmured against her hair, "but I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to build a life with you, raise horses and maybe children if we are blessed. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. Will you marry me?" Vivian pulled back just enough to see his face, to see the hope and vulnerability there. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." Their kiss was full of promise and joy, a ceiling of commitment that had been building since that first day at the hotel when he offered her a chance. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "We should tell Jack," Samuel said. "He has been giving me advice for weeks on how to propose. He will want to know his coaching worked. Your foreman was coaching you on proposals. He said I was being too cautious, that any fool could see we were in love and I should just ask already." Samuel shook his head ruefully. He was right, as usual. They told Jack the next morning, and his whoop of joy brought the other ranch hands running. Within hours, everyone on the property knew, and by the next day, half of Circleville had heard the news. The general response was positive, though Vivian overheard a few women in town gossiping about how quick it was, and wasn't it scandalous that she lived on his ranch. "Let them talk," Samuel said when she mentioned it. "People always find something to gossip about. Anyone who knows us knows this is real." They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Circleville. Vivian wore a new dress in a deep blue that Samuel said matched her eyes, and he wore his best suit with a string tie. Jack stood up as best man, and the minister's wife served as witness. It was nothing fancy, but as they said their vows in front of the congregation and God, Vivian felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. The wedding supper was held at the hotel, with half the town attending. There was fiddle music and dancing, laughter and toasts with whiskey that burned going down. Vivian danced with Samuel, with Jack, with several of the ranch hands who had come to respect her over the months. She felt light, unburdened in a way she had not experienced in years. As the evening wound down and they prepared to head back to the ranch, Samuel leaned close and whispered, "I had the main house prepared for us. Your things are already moved in. If you want to stay in the cabin instead, that is fine too, but I thought the main house is perfect," Vivian interrupted, squeezing his hand. "I am your wife now. I want to live in our home." The word made Samuel's eyes brighten. They rode back to the ranch together on his horse, Vivian wrapped in his coat against the November chill, both of them quiet with anticipation and happiness. The house had indeed been prepared. Someone, probably Jack, had lit lamps throughout and started a fire in the bedroom fireplace. There were fresh flowers on the dresser and new linens on the bed. Samuel gave her a tour, showing her the improvements he had made over the past weeks. A new stove in the kitchen, curtains in the parlor, a bookshelf he had built himself. "I wanted it to feel like yours too," he explained. "Not just the house I shared with Caroline, but a new place for both of us." Vivian turned to him, touched by the thoughtfulness. "It is perfect. You are perfect." Their wedding night was tender and unhurried, both of them nervous but eager. Samuel was careful with her, mindful of her past, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Vivian discovered that intimacy with someone you loved and trusted was entirely different from what she had feared it would be. It was connection and joy, vulnerability and strength, all tangled together. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms while the fire crackled and shadows danced on the walls. "I never thought I would have this again," Samuel murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Thank you for being brave enough to stay." "Thank you for being kind enough to let me," Vivian replied, thinking of how far they had both come from that day in the hotel. "I never thought I would feel safe enough to let anyone this close." "You are safe with me," he promised. "Always." She believed him. That was the gift they had given each other. Trust rebuilt after it had been shattered. It was not perfect or easy, but it was real. Winter settled over the valley, bringing snow that transformed the red rocks into something magical. Vivian and Samuel settled into married life, learning each other's rhythms and habits. She discovered he liked his coffee strong and his breakfast early. He learned she sang to herself while she worked with the horses, and had a talent for reading aloud in different voices that made evening stories entertaining. They celebrated Christmas quietly, just the two of them and Jack, exchanging simple gifts and eating too much of the special meal Vivian prepared. Samuel gave her a beautiful saddle tooled with horses running along the border. She gave him a painting she had commissioned from an artist in Salt Lake City, showing the ranch at sunset with the mountains rising behind it. "So we never forget where we found each other," she said, as he stared at it with suspicion in his eyes. The winter was hard on the horses, requiring extra vigilance and work. Vivian was in the barn most days, making sure the animals stayed healthy and exercised. Samuel worked alongside her, and they developed an easy partnership that felt as natural as breathing. They talked about expansion plans for the spring, about building a dedicated training facility, about the possibility of bringing in new bloodlines. In January, Vivian realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week, not wanting to get Samuel's hopes up, before riding into town to see the doctor's wife, who served as midwife for the area. When her suspicions were confirmed, she felt a rush of emotions so complex she could not name them all. Joy, certainly, but also fear. She had never thought about being a mother before, too focused on survival to imagine that future. She told Samuel that evening, watching his face carefully as she explained. His expression went through several transformations: shock, wonder, concern, and finally pure happiness. "A baby," he said as though testing the words. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Vivian asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy." Samuel pulled her into his arms, laughing. "I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed, but yes, I am happy. So happy I could burst." He pulled back to look at her. "Are you?" "I think so. I am scared too. I do not know anything about being a mother. And I do not know anything about being a father anymore, but we will figure it out together." He placed his hand gently on her stomach, which was not showing yet. "You are going to be an amazing mother, Vivian. Look at how you care for the horses. You will love this child the same way." His confidence helped settle her nerves. They told Jack the next day, swearing him to secrecy until they were ready to share the news more widely. He was predictably delighted, already making plans for how to adjust the work schedule so Vivian would not overdo it as her pregnancy progressed. The pregnancy was relatively easy at first. Vivian had some morning sickness, but nothing debilitating. She continued working with the horses through the winter and into early spring, only stopping the more physical aspects when Samuel put his foot down in her 5th month. "You are not getting on any more half-wild horses," he said firmly. "I do not care how gentle you think they are. The risk is too high." "I am fine," Vivian protested, but she knew he was right. She could feel her center of gravity shifting as her belly grew, making her movements less sure. The last thing she wanted was to fall and hurt the baby. She shifted to ground training and evaluation, leaving the riding to Jack and the other hands. It chafed to step back, but she understood the wisdom of it. Besides, there were other aspects of the ranch that needed attention. She started keeping better records of breeding lines and training progress, developing a system that would help them make informed decisions about the future. Spring brought new foals and the return of easier weather. Vivian's pregnancy became obvious, and the neighboring families began bringing gifts and advice. Some of the women who had gossiped about her hasty marriage now softened, including her in their circle in the way that expectant mothers often were. She found herself unexpectedly grateful for the community, even if it had been slow to welcome her. In late May, labor began in the middle of the night. Samuel, who had been sleeping lightly for weeks in anticipation, immediately went to fetch the midwife while Jack's wife came to stay with Vivian. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Vivian thought she could not continue, that the pain was too much. But Samuel was there through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her brow, telling her how strong she was. Their son was born as the sun set on May 28, 1879, screaming lustily and already showing signs of his father's dark hair. Samuel cried when he held him for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny, perfect human they had created. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." Vivian, exhausted but euphoric, watched her husband cradle their son and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "We should name him," she said softly. They had discussed names for months without settling on anything definitive. But now, looking at the baby, Samuel said, "What about Henry? It was my grandfather's name, Henry Michael Crawford." "Henry," Vivian repeated, testing it. "I like it. Hello, Henry. Welcome to the world." The first months of Henry's life were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding and the steep learning curve of new parents. But they managed together, taking turns walking the floor with a fussy baby, celebrating his first smile, marveling at every tiny milestone. The ranch work continued around them, with Jack and the hands taking on extra responsibilities, so Samuel and Vivian could focus on their son. By the time Henry was 6 months old, Vivian was back to working with the horses part-time, bringing the baby out to the barn in a basket where he could watch and listen. Samuel often joined them, and they fell into a routine that balanced family life with the demands of the ranch. The business continued to grow. Word of Vivian's training skills had spread throughout the territory, and they had more requests than they could handle. They hired 2 more hands and began construction on the dedicated training facility they had dreamed about. Samuel proved to be an excellent businessman, negotiating deals and managing the finances while Vivian focused on the horses. When Henry was 2 years old, Vivian discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with calm excitement rather than nervous anticipation. They knew what to expect now, felt confident in their ability to manage. Their daughter was born in March of 1882, an early spring baby with auburn curls like her mother and her father's brown eyes. They named her Rose Caroline Crawford, honoring Samuel's first wife in a way that felt right. Vivian had never felt threatened by Caroline's memory. Instead, she understood that the love Samuel had shared with his first wife had helped shape him into the man she had fallen in love with. Rose was a calmer baby than Henry had been, content to watch the world with serious eyes. Henry was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything. The sight of Samuel with both children, reading to them or playing in the yard, made Vivian's chest ache with happiness. Life settled into a rich pattern. The ranch prospered, becoming known as one of the premier horse breeding operations in Utah Territory. Samuel and Vivian worked side by side, their partnership as strong in business as it was in marriage. They faced challenges together: a harsh winter that killed several foals, a drought that tested the water supply, the ongoing demands of raising children while running a ranch. But they also had moments of pure joy. Henry's first successful ride on a pony, guided by his mother's patient instruction. Rose's delighted laughter when her father swung her up onto his shoulders. Quiet evenings on the porch after the children were asleep, Samuel and Vivian holding hands and planning for the future. Jack eventually married a widow from town, bringing her and her young daughter to live in a new house they built on ranch property. The ranch became a small community, with families working together and supporting each other. It was everything Samuel and Vivian had hoped to build when they first committed to each other. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Vivian back to the creek where they had first admitted their feelings. The cottonwoods were in full summer leaf, dappling the water with shade. They sat on the same bank, their hands linked just as they had been that first time. "I have been thinking about that day you came to the hotel in Circleville," Samuel said. "About how close I came to not going. Jack had to practically push me out the door." "I was so desperate that day," Vivian remembered. "I thought I had reached the end of my options, and then you appeared and offered me a chance. Best decision I ever made." He squeezed her hand. "You saved me, Vivian. I was drowning in grief and isolation, and you pulled me back to life." "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "I was lost too, running from everything. You gave me a place to be safe and grow strong again." Samuel turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I want you to know that I am grateful every single day that you were brave enough to stay. To trust me despite everything that had hurt you before, to build this life with me." "And I am grateful you were kind enough to let me," Vivian replied, echoing the words they had said on their wedding night. "You never tried to cage me or control me. You celebrated who I was and encouraged me to become more." They kissed in the dappled sunlight, tasting of creek water and joy and the deep satisfaction of a love that had been tested and had emerged stronger. When they broke apart, Samuel pulled a small box from his pocket. "I promised you a ring that night I proposed, but we got married so quickly I never got you one. I wanted to wait for the right time." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a single blue-green stone that matched her eyes. "This is topaz from a mine in the mountains east of here. The metalsmith in Salt Lake City helped me design it." Vivian's eyes filled with tears as he slipped it onto her finger next to her plain wedding band. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I am far from perfect," Samuel said with a smile, "but I try to be worthy of you. You are more than worthy. You are everything I did not know I needed." She looked at the ring, then at him. "I love you, Samuel Crawford, today, tomorrow, and all the days after that. I love you too, Vivian Crawford, my brave, beautiful wife." They stayed by the creek until the sun began to set, talking about their children and the ranch and all the dreams still ahead of them. When they finally returned to the house, they found Henry and Rose playing under Jack's supervision, and the sight of their family made Vivian pause. This was what happiness looked like. Not the absence of pain or challenge, but the presence of love and purpose and people who mattered. She had come to Utah running from violence and fear, with nothing but her skills and her determination to survive. She had found a place to belong and a man who loved her for exactly who she was. Together they had built something lasting and meaningful. The years continued to pass in the way that happy years do, quickly and yet also richly. Henry grew into a boy who loved the horses as much as his parents did, showing early promise as a trainer. Rose developed a stubborn streak that reminded Samuel of her mother, along with a gentle compassion that made her a favorite with the younger foals. In 1885, Vivian gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Thomas Jack Crawford. The name honored both Samuel's father Thomas and Jack Morrison, who had been instrumental in bringing Samuel and Vivian together. Thomas was a sunny, easy child who seemed to find joy in everything. The ranch continued to thrive and expand. Samuel and Vivian made strategic purchases of adjoining land, increasing their grazing area and water rights. They brought in new breeding stock from California and partnered with ranches in Nevada and Wyoming to establish a network for selling trained horses. Vivian's reputation as a trainer grew to the point where she was being asked to write articles for livestock journals about her methods. Through it all, the love between Samuel and Vivian only deepened. They had the kind of partnership that made other couples envious, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared purpose. They still had disagreements occasionally, but they had learned to talk through problems rather than letting resentment build. They made time for each other despite the demands of children and business, stealing moments alone to reconnect and remember why they had fallen in love in the first place. As 1890 approached and Henry reached his 11th birthday, Samuel and Vivian began teaching their oldest son about the business side of ranching. Henry absorbed it all eagerly, already talking about his ideas for the future. Rose, at 8, declared she wanted to be a horse trainer like her mother. Thomas, at 5, was still mostly interested in chasing chickens and playing in the dirt, but he showed the same love of animals that ran through the family. One evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Samuel and Vivian sat together in the parlor. She was mending a shirt while he worked on the account books, a domestic scene that had become comfortable over the years. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Samuel asked suddenly. "If I had not gone to the hotel that day, if you had found work somewhere else?" Vivian set down her mending and considered the question. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on alternate paths. This is the life we have, and it is a good one. It is more than good. It is everything I could have hoped for and things I did not even know to hope for." He closed the ledger and came to sit beside her on the sofa. "I never thought I would love someone the way I loved Caroline, and I was right in a sense. What we have is different, but it is no less deep or true. I understand what you mean. Every love is unique to the people involved. She leaned against his shoulder. I am glad we found each other, Samuel. Glad you gave me a chance when no one else would. I am the one who should be grateful. You brought light back into my life when I thought I would spend the rest of my days in shadow. He kissed the top of her head. You and the children are my whole world. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the house settling and the distant cry of a coyote in the hills. Outside, the ranch stretched under the stars, all the buildings and fences and animals representing years of hard work and shared dreams. When they finally went to bed, Samuel pulled Vivian close and whispered the words he had said countless times over the years, but that never lost their power. I love you. I love you too, she replied, as she always did. In the morning, there would be horses to train and children to tend, and 100 other tasks that made up their daily lives. But in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The years continued their steady march. Henry grew into a young man who combined his father's business acumen with his mother's gift for gentling horses. At 17, he was already handling major training projects on his own and courting a rancher's daughter from the next valley over. Rose, at 14, had proven to be an exceptional rider and was developing her own methods for working with difficult horses. Thomas, at 10, showed more interest in the breeding and bloodline aspects of the operation, spending hours poring over stud books and genealogies. Samuel and Vivian watched their children grow with pride and the bittersweet awareness that their babies were becoming independent people. There were new challenges as the children aged, questions about education and future plans, the normal tensions that arose as young people tested boundaries and formed their own opinions. But through it all, the foundation held strong. The ranch was prosperous enough to weather economic downturns. The family was close-knit, bonded by shared work and shared love. And Samuel and Vivian remained each other's anchor, the center around which everything else revolved. In 1895, Henry married his sweetheart in a ceremony much larger than Samuel and Vivian's had been. The young couple built a house on the eastern edge of the property and began their own life while still working for the family ranch. When their first child was born the following year, a healthy girl with red hair and a powerful set of lungs, Samuel and Vivian became grandparents. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Samuel felt the circle complete in a way he had not anticipated. This tiny person was the future made flesh, carrying forward the legacy he and Vivian had worked so hard to build. He looked at his wife across the room, saw her smiling with tears in her eyes, and knew she felt it too. Rose eventually married a veterinarian who came to Circleville to set up practice. He was a kind man who respected her abilities and supported her continuing work with the horses. Thomas took over more of the business management as Samuel began to slow down, showing a talent for negotiations and financial planning that served the ranch well. By 1900, Samuel was 54 and Vivian was 48. They had been married for nearly 20 years, and the ranch employed 15 people across multiple family units. The Crawford name was synonymous with quality horses throughout the region. They had weathered Utah's transition to statehood, economic depressions, droughts, harsh winters, and all the other challenges that came with ranching in an unforgiving land. One afternoon in late summer, Samuel and Vivian rode out to the high meadows above the ranch, ostensibly to check on the summer grazing herd but really just to spend time together away from the demands of home. They dismounted near a spring and let the horses drink while they sat on sun-warmed rocks and looked out over the valley spread below them. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is our life," Vivian said, watching hawks circle in the thermal currents above the red cliffs. When I came here on that stage in 1878, I was so scared and desperate. I could not have imagined ending up here. You were so fierce that day at the hotel, Samuel remembered, bruised and broke, but refusing to give up. I think that was when I started falling in love with you, even though I would not admit it for months. You were so kind when you had no reason to be. You did not know me, did not owe me anything, but you gave me a chance anyway. She turned to look at him, this man who had become her whole heart. Thank you for that, Samuel. Thank you for seeing me when I needed to be seen. Thank you for staying when it would have been easier to run, for being patient with me while I learned to open up again, for giving me Henry and Rose and Thomas and this whole beautiful life. His voice roughened with emotion. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vivian Crawford. She leaned over and kissed him, tasting sunshine and happiness and the deep contentment of years well spent. And you are mine, my cowboy who was kind enough to let me be myself, who never tried to break me or change me, just loved me as I was. They stayed in the meadow until the sun began its descent, talking about their grandchildren and the future of the ranch, and whether they should finally take that trip to San Francisco they had been discussing for years. When they rode back down to the valley as twilight gathered, they held hands like young lovers, unwilling to let go even for the demands of managing Rains. The house was full when they returned. Children and grandchildren gathered for the weekly family dinner that had become tradition. The table was crowded and loud, filled with laughter and friendly arguments and the warmth of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Samuel and Vivian sat at opposite ends, presiding over the chaos with contentment. After dinner, when the younger children had been put to bed and the adults sat on the porch enjoying the cool evening air, Henry raised his glass in a toast. To my parents, who built something lasting from nothing but hard work and love, you showed all of us what a real partnership looks like. Thank you. The sentiment was echoed around the porch, glasses raised and heads nodding. Samuel felt his chest tighten with emotion as he looked at his family. All the people who existed, because he had made the decision to go to that hotel 22 years ago, because Vivian had been brave enough to accept his offer. We are the lucky ones, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet night. Lucky to have found each other when we both needed it most. Lucky to have built this life together. Lucky to be surrounded by all of you. He looked at Vivian, holding her gaze. But mostly I am lucky that I got a second chance at love, and that I was smart enough not to waste it. Vivian smiled at him across the porch, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I am the lucky one. I needed someone brave enough to let me stay. Someone who would not try to own me or control me, but who would stand beside me as an equal. You gave me that, Samuel. You gave me everything. The night deepened around them, stars emerging in the vast Utah sky. The conversation continued in quieter tones as people drifted off to their own homes or bedrooms. Eventually it was just Samuel and Vivian on the porch, sitting close together in the darkness. No regrets? Samuel asked softly. Not a single one, Vivian replied. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner. But maybe we both needed the paths we traveled to become the people who could love each other this way. Maybe so. She rested her head on his shoulder. I like to think everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. All the pain and fear and loss led us to each other. And from there, we built something beautiful. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. Horses moving in the corrals, a dog barking in the distance, the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. These were the sounds that had formed the soundtrack of their life together, and they were sweeter than any music. As the years continued to pass, Samuel and Vivian gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting Henry and Thomas to manage things while they enjoyed a slower pace. They spent more time with their grandchildren, teaching them about horses and passing down the knowledge that had been the foundation of the family's success. They took that trip to San Francisco and traveled to Denver to see where Vivian had come from, laying old ghosts to rest. Rose's veterinarian husband became an integral part of the ranch's operations, his medical expertise helping to keep the horses healthy and productive. The partnership between the Crawford ranch and his practice became a model that other operations tried to emulate. Rose herself never stopped training, working with horses well into her later years and training her own children in the methods her mother had taught her. In 1910, Samuel and Vivian celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party that brought people from all over the territory. Old friends and business associates, family members near and distant, all gathered to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the region. Stories were told about Samuel's patience and Vivian's skill, about the horses they had bred and trained, about the family they had raised. But the most meaningful moment came late in the evening when they were finally alone, sitting once again by the creek where so much of their love story had unfolded. The cottonwoods had grown larger over the years, and the stones in the creek bed had been worn smoother by decades of flowing water. But the essential nature of the place remained unchanged. "You remember what I said that day all those years ago?" Samuel asked, his hand finding hers with the ease of long practice. "About being afraid of caring for someone and losing them. I remember. And I remember what I said about fear winning if we let it. You were right. If I had let fear stop me, I would have missed out on the best 25 years of my life." He brought her hand to his lips. "I would have missed you. And I would have missed you, missed all of this." Vivian gestured to encompass not just the creek, but everything it represented, the ranch, the family, the life they had built. "I needed a cowboy kind enough to let me be free. You needed someone brave enough to stay. We found what we needed in each other. More than what we needed. What we did not even know we wanted until we had it." They kissed in the twilight, their love as strong in 1910 as it had been in 1878, tested and proven by time. When they finally returned to the house, walking slowly and holding each other up, they found it lit with lanterns and full of the sounds of family. Their legacy was not just the horses or the land or the business. It was the love they had modeled, the partnership they had demonstrated, the proof that broken hearts could heal and trust could be rebuilt. The years that followed brought the natural changes that time always brings. Samuel's hair turned fully gray, then white. Vivian's auburn curls faded to silver, though her eyes remained as vivid as ever. They moved more slowly, felt aches in joints that had worked hard for decades, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained constant. Great-grandchildren were born, and Samuel and Vivian delighted in the babies who carried their legacy forward. Henry's children had children of their own, creating a sprawling family tree that stretched across the West as younger generations moved to new opportunities while maintaining ties to the ranch that had started it all. In 1918, Samuel fell ill with pneumonia. For weeks he struggled, his strong body finally showing the limits of mortality. Vivian barely left his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, holding his hand through the long nights. The family gathered, preparing for the worst, but Samuel was not quite ready to let go. He recovered slowly, emerging from the illness weakened but alive. When he was finally able to sit up in bed and take notice of the world again, he looked at Vivian and smiled. "You are not getting rid of me that easily." "I should hope not," she replied, though her relief was evident in every line of her face. We made a vow, remember, for better or worse. I plan to hold you to that. I have no intention of going anywhere without you, Samuel promised. When the time comes, we go together. It was not a morbid statement, just a recognition of how intertwined their lives had become. Neither could imagine existing without the other. They had become two halves of a whole, and separating them seemed unnatural. Samuel regained his strength gradually over the following months, though he never quite returned to his pre-illness vigor. He spent more time in a rocking chair on the porch, Vivian beside him, watching the ranch continue its daily rhythms. They told stories to the great-grandchildren who came to visit, tales of the early days when the ranch was just getting started, when their parents and grandparents were young. In 1920, Vivian began experiencing heart trouble. The doctor from Circleville, now a younger man who had taken over the practice from his predecessor, prescribed rest and caution. Vivian, who had never been good at either, found the restrictions frustrating. But Samuel gently insisted, reminding her of all the times she had nursed him through various ailments and injuries over the years. "Let me take care of you for once," he said, bringing her tea and reading to her from the livestock journals she still enjoyed. "You have spent 40 years looking after everyone else. It is your turn to be looked after." They spent more time together than ever, their world contracting to the space they could occupy comfortably. The family made sure they were never alone, rotating visits and help so the couple could remain in their own home. It was clear to everyone that Samuel and Vivian wanted to finish their days in the place where they had built their life together. On a warm evening in late September 1922, they sat on the porch as they had countless times before. The ranch spread out before them in the golden light, unchanged in its essentials despite all the years that had passed. Horses grazed in the pastures, buildings stood sturdy and well-maintained, and in the distance the red rocks glowed like fire. "It has been a good life," Samuel said quietly, his hand wrapped around Vivian's. "Better than I deserved." "You deserved every bit of it," Vivian replied. "You worked for it. We both did." "I love you, Vivian Crawford. I have loved you since the day you told me my broken mare could be healed. You taught me that I could be healed too. And I love you, Samuel Crawford, my kind cowboy who gave me a home when I had nothing, who never tried to cage me but loved me free." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for 44 years of happiness." They sat together as the sun set and the stars emerged, talking in quiet voices about the life they had shared. As the night deepened and grew cool, their children and grandchildren came to help them inside, but Samuel and Vivian were reluctant to leave the porch. "Just a little longer," Vivian said. "The night is so beautiful." So the family brought out blankets and settled around them, creating a cocoon of warmth and love on that September evening. Stories were told and memories shared, laughter mingling with tears as everyone present understood they were witnessing something sacred. Samuel and Vivian sat at the center of it all, still holding hands, still together after all the years and miles and challenges. When their great-granddaughter asked how they had stayed in love so long, Vivian smiled. "We chose each other every day," she said simply. "When it was easy and when it was hard. We remembered that we were partners, equals, both giving and both receiving, and we never stopped being grateful for the gift we had found in each other." "Also," Samuel added with a twinkle in his eye, "I let her train the horses her way, and she let me think I was in charge of the finances." The laughter that followed was warm and full of affection. As the night grew late, the family eventually went to their own homes and beds, leaving just Samuel and Vivian and their oldest son Henry, who would not leave his parents alone. "You too should rest," he said gently. "We will," Samuel promised, "but let us stay here just a bit longer." Your mother and I want to watch the stars together." Henry understood and left them, though he remained close enough to help if needed. Samuel and Vivian sat in the darkness, surrounded by the familiar sounds of the ranch at night, content in the silence that only comes from decades of companionship. Samuel Crawford passed peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, Vivian's hand in his, having lived to the age of 76. He had been granted another second chance at life when he recovered from his pneumonia, 4 extra years to love his wife and watch his great-grandchildren grow. Vivian held him as he took his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. She followed him just 6 weeks later, her heart finally giving out. The family was not surprised. Everyone who knew them had understood that they were a unit, inseparable in life and not meant to be parted in death. She was buried beside him in the small cemetery outside Circleville, under the red rock cliffs they had both loved. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations as Samuel and Vivian had always intended. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on the traditions of careful breeding, patient training, and treating animals with respect and kindness. The Crawford name remained synonymous with quality horses for decades to come. But more than the business, Samuel and Vivian's true legacy was the love they had modeled. They had shown their family and everyone who knew them that it was possible to heal from devastating loss, that trust could be rebuilt after betrayal, that 2 broken people could create something whole and beautiful together. They had proven that real partnership meant supporting each other's strengths rather than exploiting weaknesses, that love was both freedom and commitment intertwined. Their story became family legend, told and retold to new generations. The tale of how Samuel, grieving and closed off, had gone to help a desperate stranger and found his second great love. How Vivian, running from violence and fear, had found a man kind enough to let her be free and brave enough to love her without trying to own her. How they had built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection, creating a legacy that extended far beyond horses and land. Years later, when the old cabin where Vivian had first lived was being renovated, workers found something carved into the wooden frame of the door, hidden beneath layers of weather and time. In neat letters, obviously done with care, were the words, "He needed someone brave enough to stay. She needed a cowboy kind enough to let her." 1878, 1922. No one knew which of them had carved it or when, but it was preserved as part of the family history, a testament to a love that had started with desperation and kindness and grown into something that changed everyone it touched. The ranch still stands, passed down through 5 generations now from that day in 1878, when Samuel Crawford made the decision to help a stranger. The red rocks still glow in the sunset, the creek still runs through cottonwood groves, and horses still graze in the pastures. And somewhere in it all, the spirit of Samuel and Vivian remains, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay, and the kindest thing you can do is let someone be free. Their love story was not grand or dramatic in the way of legends. It was simply 2 people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, building something lasting from the broken pieces they started with. And in the end, that was more powerful than any fairy tale, because it was real and hard-won and absolutely true.